Welcome to the Wellness Warrior podcast, where we explore the journey to lasting well-being in a constantly changing world. Get ready to discover the secrets of embracing change, fostering resilience, and cultivating wellness in a sustainable manner. With your hosts, Han Yi and Lalit, this is your guide to thriving in the face of life's challenges. Join us as we embark on an unscripted odyssey into the human condition, featuring heartfelt personal stories, enlightening insights, and wisdom from experts.
Hello, warriors. I'm Han Yi, your wellness enthusiast, mindfulness instructor, and executive coach. And so, with years of experience in helping individuals and teams unlock their full potential, my work and my interest is really centered around finding flow and embracing our inner warrior for holistic well-being and personal growth in both life and career.
Yeah, so thanks, Hani. Hello, everyone. My name is Lalit. I work with SAP, but as a professional, I'm a design thinking expert. I have supported and driven large-scale innovation with our organizations and customers. I've also written a book on change, which is about when change happens. And that's an area of interest which Hani and I have decided to explore together, the human side of change. And what does it take for individuals and organizations to transform?
Fantastic. Yeah. And together we are the Wellness Warriors, and we're here to help you navigate life's challenges and embrace your inner warrior. In each episode, we'll explore a new aspect of wellness, from mental health and self-care, and also to leadership and teamwork.
Yes. And during this course, we will be joined by various experts who have that experience in driving large-scale change and their personal changes. We will explore their journeys, we'll explore some of the challenges they faced, we'll hear some of their exciting moments and not so exciting moments. And today we are very pleased to introduce Mark from Telos Partners. So welcome, Mark, to this session.
And hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so grab your headphones, find a comfortable spot. Let's dive into the world of wellness. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. Let's all become wellness warriors, and let's warmly welcome Mark. Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So let's start.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. So great to have you on Wellness Warriors. So why don't we start with just inviting you to share more about your background and what you do?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm in a small boutique consulting firm. We help actually organizations to transform and change and go through change. And we also help the individuals in that organization. So for us, there's always a duality of an individual and the organization. That's what we do. The name Telos is actually Greek and stands for purpose. Yeah, and purpose is something very important for us because purpose is something which helps you. You have let's say, a higher goal which orients you and which helps you go through change. That is my passion, I joined them here in Singapore 3.5 years ago. I have a background of 27 years in FMCG and mainly pharma, where I was a senior executive. Yeah, and later we can explore maybe a little bit my journey and my bumps. Like everyone has some bumps in the road, and then you have to pick yourself up. Yeah.
I hear bumps. Yes. I like that. So tell us, I mean, yeah, so you are actually based in Singapore and live in many different parts of the world, right? Tell us a bit about all the travels and adventures you've had.
Okay, yeah, a few. So I mean, I after my studies in Germany, I left for a 6-month project in Spain. So I lived a little bit in Spain. Then I started work, classic, in my hometown. After a while I left, I worked in a different part of Germany. And then indeed I was offered a role as a GM of a business division in France. So I lived in Paris. You know, if you think about what's going in Paris right now, you don't want to be necessarily there. But the French are fighting for what they believe is right. So that's maybe also a strong cultural trait. Yeah. But I enjoyed very much living there. I speak also fluent French, and I really am close to that culture. And yeah, then I came back to Germany for a relatively short stint before then going to Singapore, where I'm since 9 years.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you
I
very
mean,
much.
soon, as you know, my journey will bring me back to Germany, but for now I'm still here, and I love this part of the world, and especially Singapore. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Very interesting. You mentioned about, you made that comment about that French and certainly their passion, right? And sort of tying back to that word purpose you mentioned, right? What are your thoughts? I mean, is passion and purpose, what do you think is that relationship? Are they the same, or and they live off each other? Like you need to have
I
passion and
mean,
purpose, yeah.
yeah, they are not the same.
Hmm.
But I think they live off each other. Indeed, it's a good point, a good way of saying it. I mean, I think a purpose is really this. I mean, you may like the word of North Star, this orientation, this deep knowing that this is, why you exist. I mean, exist. Let's say, I don't want to be too philosophical, but let's keep it a little bit for a moment in the professional side. If you know why you are here, why you do the work you do, yeah, what is the deeper sense of what you do, that gives you a very strong orientation and a very strong meaning. And this, at least, I mean, for many people I know, also from my work now, and definitely for me personally, gives me a very deep motivation and passion. So I think having a very clear purpose is a deep source of passion and that positive energy. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in that sense, they absolutely live off each other. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, and I do wonder, right? This thing about knowing and having this North Star, right? Is that something that you'll always have? Or how does one arrive at that sense that they are clear about their purpose, right? I mean,
Well, let me tell you
yeah.
an anecdote, and that anecdote has also to do with telos, because about 50 over 15 17 years ago, I first got in touch with Telos because the company invited Telos to help us with the organizational transformation we were on at the time. And so I got in touch with the Telos consultant, and one of the first things he asked me, and it stuck with me ever since, we sat down and said, oh, let's meet for dinner and just get to know each other. And then he asked me, so tell me, what's your purpose? And I was sitting there. I couldn't answer the question. I was running around, working like crazy, flying around. I was in international marketing, flying around the world, doing thousands of things, full of energy and everything. But that question I never asked myself. So the point, I think, is to say, hey, there is a moment where you have to pause and just take a step back and say, hey, what am I here for? Yeah. So I think you have to ask yourself that question, and that will kind of bring your energy flow in order. I like the point, Hani, when you said about flow, yeah, and that is indeed something where you maximize your focus and your energy, yeah. And I mean, I have to say, and that is maybe also why I got stuck with Telos and why I ultimately joined it, because it was a question. I didn't have the answer, but the question initiated a transformation, and it took me very long to find my purpose. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, right? And this thing about what I'm hearing is really embracing and grappling with that question,
Yes.
rather than avoiding it, right? And I'm gonna sort of tie to so Lalit has a book, and I'm actually reading it. It's a great book, right? He mentions about this term creative tension. Yeah, I feel like it's almost related, right? So as we are discovering our purpose, right, there will be sometimes tension, right? And how do we harness that energy into something, creating something beautiful and discovering something that's meaningful and purposeful for not only ourselves, our teams, our communities, our families, and certainly for the organizations that we are in. Ladi, what are your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, also drawing upon your expertise around sort of this organizational change. Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. In terms of creative and creative tension, we all know that there is an aspiration all of us have. You know, we have a view of the world and a view of where we see ourselves in it, which is, like you said, that we do in a day-to-day life. And very often that view is blurred by what's the next job, what's the next level, and where do we need to go next. And that really necessarily doesn't define purpose. It defines a goal, it defines a path which we've been all trained from childhood to do. And like you said, currently, the bigger challenge is being to find out what is it that I really, really want. And the reason why we don't do that, and that's where I think Hani's example of creative tension comes, is when we start looking at current reality. And that tends to somehow pull us down. So if you kind of look at, okay, let's say this is something that we really, really want to achieve. And then when we start looking at ourselves where we are at today, that becomes a kind of a space where we don't feel so confident about achieving that purpose. We start questioning, challenging. So my question to you, Mark, was more about this kind of a context. So when you discovered that purpose in yourself, how did you deal with this current reality and that journey between your current reality towards the purpose? How has that been for you?
I think it's a very good question. I mean, it was not a, I mean, the eureka moment, if you wish, was not the answer, but rather the question. Yeah. And then it was a process. So now how did I deal with it? I think somehow I changed my approach and being a little bit more maybe reflective and asking also more questions. Yeah. I mean, my purpose has indeed to do with transformation. Yeah, I don't want to go too deep, or I can later. I'm happy to share a bit more. But my point being, you move a little bit away from being in front in doing things to reflecting and asking yourself questions and trying to reflect. So if that makes sense. So you change maybe a little bit your behavior. I mean, that's a very personal description, yeah. But for me, it became from something maybe not thinking too much to thinking more and reflecting more. So somehow the question was there and I had to reflect. Yeah. And it was a bit of a process and it became clearer and clearer. And then when it was relatively clear, then that's almost like you have to slow down and then you can re-accelerate, but in a much more effective way. Yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah, because then you have the right direction and then you can much better go towards. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Creative tension has that energy giving, what I typically call that secret sauce for energy in an individual.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah.
So coming a little more to then your personal journey, you talked about the transformation and you moved from a company, Boehringer, and then you moved into Sanofi, and then from Sanofi was your journey to Telos. Obviously, personally, you would have dealt with a lot of change yourself. And obviously, in that particular process, what were some of the key highlights of your journey and what were some of the challenges and how did you overcome them?
The bumps, yeah.
Yeah, the bumps, yeah, a few bumps, yeah. So let me start maybe by the first phase, and it's very interesting from I mean, our division was basically, there was a decision taken to divest it, and so it initiated a carve-out process. Now, two things happened. Number one, we had to organize, we have been deeply involved in the project management of the carve-out, which was on top of the day-to-day work. Now, for the day-to-day work, suddenly there was an increased pressure of delivering the best results ever. So on the one hand, you have more pressure on your day job. On top of that, you have to deliver the complex project. Of course, we had some support from some consultant, blah, blah, blah. But there was a lot of involvement in managing this organizational carve out, as let's say, yeah. And so suddenly you find yourself in this double pressure, and you do not have a clear perspective. You do not know what your future will be, and there you are. And how can you orientate yourself? Somehow you say, oh, everything will be okay, and then you have to carry on, and then you have to push back and find your way. So that was an interesting experience, and when I say interesting, that was a bump, but interesting in the sense how, yeah, I mean, I had not had that experience before. This kind of M&A type activity is very commonplace. For me at this time, it was shaking up a little bit my world, yeah. And I pulled the rug a little bit under my feet first, but then I had to get back on my feet. And maybe an experience or a realization is what holds you, what guides you is actually maybe more than your purpose, is more your values also. Yeah. And that is maybe also something important. You have to always reflect back to your values, so that you can say, wait a moment, there are areas which I will not do because this would be going against my values. Yeah. And then, I mean, and that kind of, that purpose and these values give you orientation and help you go through this. Yeah. And especially then at the second part, I mean, I'm attached to culture, and it's not about judging anything. It's more about simply realizing there wasn't a non-fit, yeah, for me when I arrived at the new business and in my new role, there was a non-fit. Then I had to just say, hey, wait a moment, okay, it doesn't work. Yeah, then you have to carry on, and you see there is a bump then when you kind of leave your job and all, but then you get a new, and then I really said, now is the time. I joined Telos, and that is my true deep passion, yeah, to help organizations transform for the better. Yeah, so yeah, I can I don't know, that gives maybe a little bit of some idea. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
But you come to realize, yeah, these are the moments where you start to think. Yeah, you look in the mirror. You what do you do with your life? And when you think that you have certain parameters which you feel are like safe, and suddenly no, not as safe. I mean, it was a period of growth for sure. Yeah, if I look back on it, it was a strong period of growth. When you go into it, you not necessarily see it like this. And that's also an interesting thing, and an interesting advice maybe, if you think about, you have to try and see it like that. How can you see this as an opportunity for your personal growth? Because then you have a much stronger way of going through this, yeah, because it is, yeah, and you should not miss it by putting your head in the sand or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, this actually is great advice for our viewers and listeners, right? Because many of us are going through this personal challenge.
I believe so. Yeah.
And this whole belief that any change that we do has an opportunity for us is, I think, great advice. So if you were to kind of talk to a person currently going through such a transformation, what are the 3 or 4 things you would say, hey, this is something that you must do so that they don't get reactive to the change, but become a little more proactive to it?
Yeah, I think first you have to just realize and say, what do you feel? Where do you stand vis-a-vis that change? What's going through your head? There may be fears, there may be insecurities, there may be deep frustration, there may be, you may be angry, yeah, and so on and so forth. And then I think you have to acknowledge where you are, yeah. And then you have to, I mean, there's a famous, is it Covey, the model, the circle of influence, the circle of control. You have to, you have to kind of realize, okay, what can you control? What can you influence? And you have to let go of the things which you cannot. Neither control nor influence. Yeah, that's important, and it is very, very difficult. It's very easy to say, but it's difficult. But you have to try, because it will not help you, I think. And then you have to really try indeed to think about, so wait a moment, what can I learn? Is there something I can learn? Yeah, how can I handle my emotions in this? And we at Telos, we have helped clients also with that. Yeah, and we have this like, think about, I mean, here in this part of the world, we play badminton more than other sports maybe. And think of when you play badminton. I mean, I have played badminton in the past, actually, in the team and so on, when I was much younger. Today I couldn't. But you have to be at the tee, if that makes sense, yeah, in order to control the game. Yeah, you have to be in the center, and you have to be flexible, you have to be agile, so you have to react, you have to be alert and agile. Yeah, and I think that if you try to embrace that analogy, this is your journey, and then really, how can you control the things you can control and influence the things you can influence? And is there something you want to learn? Yeah. And so yeah, try to change your perspective with that situation into such a perspective, yeah, if that's possible. And
No,
it's,
thanks for
I'm sitting here, I'm saying that I know for full well with my own experience how difficult that can be, but try.
what's coming up for me as you mentioned that is this. I loved how you introduced the idea of the T, and this idea about as we navigate change, there's always two sides to the coin, right? So there's of course the difficult part, and then of course yet there's the silver lining, the positives, the growth, and they're all part of the same coin. Right. And I think this idea that it's really about being able to hold and accept that there's two sides to the coin. Just like a bump, there's up and down, right? If you want to go up, you must be able to come down. That's the whole idea. And I think that's something that I think at a very human level, right? We're always so skewed, especially in this day and age, right? We go after only the positives. Let's make this, and sort of almost like an instant gratification, right? We just want the highs, the wins, the results, right? But are we also being able to embrace the being in the trenches? And to your point of not knowing, I really don't know what's going to happen. I don't feel equipped, and it feels like my takeaway is that it's okay, and that is a necessary, almost rite of passage to grow, to realize the growth, even, and it's this ongoing journey.
Yeah, and I like that point about what you say. I really like that when you say you have to sense it, and I think this is this being alert and just embrace the situation and feel it, yeah, instead of being in this maybe kind of defensive, I don't know, shutting out the reality mode or not wanting to accept it or something. I mean, we know about this famous change curve, the I don't know, Kübler-Ross or whatever the name is of the psychologists who have developed that. You go through that, yeah. That is a bit of an abstract theoretical model, but it happens, yeah. And so you may want to reject, but you have to accept, yeah, and then you come out stronger. No?
And I think it's a lot to do with also, at that point, like you said, when you're at your lowest, is to have faith in your strengths and going back and discovering your strengths. I think what has been for me personally an experience is when I'm at my lowest, I try to find out where my strengths are. So like you said about the influences, then using your strengths to then influence the areas around the people who can help you or who can at least recognize your strengths and give you those opportunities that you may potentially need. Because very often that loss of confidence actually becomes a negative, I would say, impact on the individual as well as the conversations the individual has with the world outside. And that impacts the individual's ability to get more successful post that strength. But absolutely, the toughest moments are when you grow. That's for sure.
And I would like to build on a point, Lalit, which you just mentioned about talk to people. You mentioned something. This is so important. You have friends, people you trust, yeah, and that is an excellent point also to say talk to these people and reach out, yeah, in these moments, yeah, and that I think that's a very good and critical point also to emphasize. I like that a lot, yeah, because true, you should not doubt yourself, and then you should just share and ask and don't be alone, no, that's important, yeah.
I think this thing about asking for help or asking to be with someone else, I mean, and talking about it, I think it's a fantastic low-hanging fruit. But sometimes it's sometimes difficult, right? It's like we have this shield and this ego, right? And that sort of hinders us from, hey, Mark, can we speak? I just want to share, I just want to talk, right? And we are so glued to our devices now, right? It's like, and even it's like, I'll just text you how I'm feeling, Mark. Hopefully you can respond and help me. What do you think about that? Like, so digital transformation, right? Yeah. And about like how do we also still maintain that level of connectedness, right, with ourselves and with other people, right? Certainly in the digital age, the AI age, and of course with ChatGPT and all that, right? So, this is a very interesting and disruptive environment we're in.
But I mean, on that note, a curiosity I have, I mean, in your field, in your area, one thing I notice, or no, I will not say what I notice. I want to ask you maybe if that's okay. But
Yeah.
because what you say is so right. I mean, how do you see people being able to pause, to maybe take a pause, take a reflection, maybe reach out, human connection? How do you see this? I mean, you alluded to it, Hani, but how do you see this ability to just pause and step out of a rat race or a hamster wheel or whatever we may call it? Yeah. What's your view on that?
Well, thanks for asking that question. I think I mean, being a mindfulness instructor, I think that certainly is an important practice, right? And unsurprisingly, it can actually be very difficult for a lot of us because we're so ingrained in this age of just going faster, right? And the moment we pause, it is a terribly uncomfortable and sometimes even a very stressful experience. Right, because that's just how we are wired, right? Everybody needs more from us. We need to deliver more. We need to be faster. We need to be more productive. I have no time to pause. I have no time to ask questions. I have no time to reflect, right? But what is interesting is that you're really drawing from what we understand of performance, human performance, just like our muscle, right? When we go to the gym, the muscle doesn't grow when we're working out, right? The muscle grows when we're resting, when we're recovering, right? And so it is actually a necessary inner practice to develop in order for us to raise our game, right? And so this thing about going slower to then go faster. And so it comes back to the idea of the bump, right? The trials, right? Sometimes you have to slow down, but the slowing down is positioning for you to go faster, right? So in terms of having holidays, having walks, right? Playing badminton, right? All those things are actually also moments of pause and reflection as well, right? So sometimes pausing may not necessarily just be about stopping, right? It can be doing something that honors our values and listening to ourselves and taking ourselves out of that system, right? And I think those things can actually be just as helpful. But
I agree,
it may be hard, but we start by maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then you grow that. But it's a commitment to that practice. It's a language, it's a skill, and I think it can be harnessed and sharpened over time.
And there's an added dimension. If you think of it, from the day we probably start getting coherent in our thinking, we are grow through criticism. First, our parents will criticize whatever we do when we do wrong. Then we have teachers who are criticizing us when we don't do right. Then we get into work life, and then our bosses are busy telling us what we are not good at. So in silent moments, I was having a very interesting conversation when we were discussing self-reflection. This person says, whenever I have conversations with myself, I'm only thinking about what I'm not doing well. And that actually creates a discomfort in that self-silence. So people actually avoid it because of that reason.
Interesting point.
Very learning to love yourself and learning to understand that you are your best friend rather than you also being critical of yourself. And that shift will improve, I think, the self-reflection and the mindfulness of individuals.
The inner critic, right? Your worst enemy, right? And if you don't train or learn how to reframe that, we can literally beat ourselves up.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's also about, how, like you say, on what kind of feedback you are exposed to, because feedback is powerful, but done wrong, like you say, it conditions you into that maybe vicious negative kind of cycle more, no, as you say.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So to build on that, right? So Mark, your advice was speak to people, and based on after this discussion, speak to people. Find at least 2 or 3 people who are your champions, your ambassadors, who are your advocates, right? Versus going to look for people who are just going to beat you down. You can have a balance. Assemble that panel, your board, your advisory board, if you will.
But also, I mean, what can you give? That is what you ask and you can give. And I mean, not talking about how to give feedback, but there is a how to give good feedback. And that is maybe also interesting to start practicing so that it becomes something which builds. Yeah. But anyway, so
there's a very interesting conversation around this positive feedback. So there's a concept, like you said, of give and take. So the idea is they are saying that if you can create a group of 3 whom you can give positive reinforcement to in times on a regular basis, and in turn that group gives you positive reinforcement, you actually create a kind of an energy web around yourselves. And the saying is that find those 3 people or find those 2 people who will give you genuine positive feedback, and you in turn contribute to giving them genuine positive feedback. you are creating a kind of a positive reinforcement cycle among all the three of you. Of each one of you will benefit.
It's almost like a
That's
multiplier
powerful.
effect, right? So
Yes.
it's sort of a virtuous cycle.
Yes, yeah, it's powerful. I like that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
good.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, I mean, we are talking about all this adversity and wellness, right? And so what would you say to your younger self, right? So yeah, letter to your younger self. What would that letter include?
That's, I think, what would I say? I mean, I don't know if in which order, but definitely laughing a lot, is on it, and you have to try and take yourself not so serious also, yeah, and you have to be able to laugh about yourself a little bit. So that's high on my list, yeah, so definitely, yeah. Another thing I think is be curious, yeah, be really curious and I mean, look, I had the privilege also think about Asia. It's really a different culture. It's so enriching, yeah. And you have to be curious, yeah. And I mean, I would then say, okay, you find many common human elements which are common, yeah. So I always try to look at what's common, what's different. Lots of things are common because we are all human beings, yeah. And it's not like, oh, so many cultural differences, let's all indulge in the difference. No, let's look for commonalities, but you have to be curious and open. Yeah, and that I think is something, when we think about, I like this concept of cognitive diversity, yeah, which is very enriching also, yeah, and so that's that is maybe something you can tap into when you are curious, yeah. So these are high on my list. Probably you're laughing that and think get enough sleep is another one. And I mean, maybe another one is, and again, this is a challenge, but we talked about earlier, this rat race, this busyness, and about pausing, mindfulness, definitely, but also, the word priority, that's an interesting one, because until not so long ago, it was singular. The one thing which is important. And then it became plural, and now it becomes and are you able to discern what are the three things which are critically important? Oh God, then I have to stop things. And that's also, like you say, that's also something where we are conditioned that makes us uncomfortable. We might miss out something. So this is also maybe something to try and say, what is important, and then focus on that.
Thank you so much for sharing that letter to our younger selves. I'm going to
But I
borrow
think
that.
most
I'm going
important,
to
I think
steal
on
that.
the way, laughing, I like laughing a lot. Is healthy.
It's therapeutic, right? Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark, for your time and joining the Wellness Warrior. Your nuggets of wisdom, your laughter has been enlightening, and really appreciate your presence and blessing us with your insights and even your suggestions and recommendations. And so
My
thank you,
pleasure, and
everyone.
thanks you.
Yeah. And so to everyone who's listening, remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And let's all become wellness warriors. Our experiences, there's always that silver lining, right? And so it's about learning how to reframe and drawing upon our strengths, remembering our values, and discovering that purpose, which is the North Star as well. And so I hope this is just a bit of all the great things that has come out from this episode, and wish everybody well, and see you at the next episode. All right. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
This has been the Wellness Warrior Podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform.